Due to popular demand, we're gonna check out the new ES Supreme. Welcome back, Troglodytes, to your daily dose guitar information, the Trogly's Guitar Show. I was not expecting Gibson to add new models to the Supreme lineup when they came back with these things, but hey, here we are, a semi-hollow version with F-holes within the 3XX family. So we're gonna learn all about these things today, but let's just grab some first impressions real quick. It's a really nice figured maple top. I'm loving the seafoam green color. It's very refreshing. We haven't seen anything quite as exotic on these lately, out of the Gibson USA division anyways. I mean, we've got like Blueberry Burst exclusives that we've just recently documented, but this is exotic but yet tame, and that's why I chose this particular color. But let's learn all about the history of the Supreme. It was actually introduced in 1999 on the SG model. They looked like this. They incorporated a flame top and had some unique inlays. However, starting in 2003, the Les Paul joined the fun, and when people say, I love the Supreme, it's because of these. They are vastly different from a regular Les Paul in the fact that they actually have a carved back. Now, this is just my weird cream Supreme. Usually, you have the really nice figuring on the top, and they also put the figured maple on the back. If you want to look at a slightly more normal Supreme, check out my Guitar of the Week version. Yeah, it doesn't have the inlays, and has a figured ebony fretboard instead, but all the other characteristics are there. But due to the carved back, these were actually a little bit larger than a regular Les Paul, and they were all chambered out. So, in many ways, kind of like an ES335. So now flash forward to late 2023. Gibson listens to the fan demand to bring the Supreme back because the last time they did one was 2019 as a 125th anniversary model, and that one got cut short. Instead of making 125, they made just over 30. So now we get the modern Supreme. If you wanted it to be like the originals, you were heavily disappointed, but at least the name lives on. They introduced this new chandelier logo that apparently came from Gibson's archives. It was basically a Les Paul modern souped up because you got that heel carve on the back. And then in the beginning of 2024, the SG Modern Supreme was then introduced. And I've got videos on all these guitars if you want to take a closer look. So now, July 2024, we see the Electric Spanish lineup enter into the Supreme category. And the reason why I think they did this is because ES guitars naturally have a pressed back to look like it's been carved, and they've got the top. Calling them a chambered guitar is not exactly the truth, but hey, it vaguely reminds you of the original Les Paul Supreme, so I think that's why they did it. We don't have any heel swoop on these guys, although that would have been interesting if they would have found a way to do it. But these are being offered at $4,299 and in a few different finishes. The base colors that all dealers have access to include Bourbon Burst. The one we're talking about today is Seafoam Green, but they also have a very blue Blueberry Burst as compared to what we've seen in the past. However, there are two Gibson.com exclusives this time. A Royal Tan, which I believe they're borrowing off of the Epiphone USA casinos, and then the 3-pickup Ebony version. We'll review that one another day. I personally chose Seafoam for my review piece because I like the fact that it has the natural back of the neck. I like to see the wood grain of things, and all the other hues just happens to have a darker finish on it. And quite naturally, the Seafoam coloring is rather light too, so it really shows off all that figuring that you could have. But I know what you're thinking, $4,300, that's $300 more than the other Supremes. What exactly is going on here? Is this a souped up 335? Is it a souped up 45? What about a 355? Well, I did the deep dive so you wouldn't have to. The correct answer is none of them. Okay, so a regular ES335 has single ply binding on the front, single ply on the back. An ES345 has 3 ply on the front, 1 ply on the back. But then the Big Mac Daddy 355 has 7 ply on the front and 3 on the back. But what does the new Supreme have? Count it with me. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 5 ply binding on the front and 3 ply on the back. So they really did just split this thing in the middle and make it its own thing. You can't actively say it's one or the other necessarily, and that's probably why they called it the ES Supreme rather than the ES-XXX Supreme. But I would say it's closest to a slightly stripped down ES355, of which we have no Gibson USA equivalent to actively compare it to at this time, outside of the custom shop. Tricky, tricky, Gibson. They really did just carve their own thing out here, which I think is great. However, if we want to play devil's advocate, we could compare it to an ES3 335 figure top. Those are $4,000 brand new. So besides the color options and the binding, what do you get that's different? We've got the inclusion of an ebony fretboard with our Super 400 inlays that are true mother of pearl. And we now have a bound headstock with the chandelier logo rather than the crown. Now don't forget, there are cheaper satin 335s and base non-super premium flamey tops that you could also consider if you don't necessarily need all the fancy cosmetic attributes. However, that's not the only difference here. There are things besides cosmetics that make this different. We got push-pull pots. You can coil split these pickups, which is not all that common on a 335-ish guitar nowadays. And they've changed up your pickups. Instead of your calibrated T-types, you now have the Burstbucker Rhythm and Lead Pro models. If you can change pickups yourself, that probably doesn't matter to you, but what you can't really change is the stock compound fretboard radius, at least not easily. So, in a roundabout way, if you were already in the market for one of these figured 335s, they do seem to kind of make sense within the Gibson family of things. But again, it's 2024. You got so many options on the guitar market. But that is the best way I could find to explain this new model. But with that price, it does come with a case. It's just the standard black one that Gibson has been making lately with the rectangular latches. Here's a look at your handle. Now, when you first open it up, you're probably going to notice there's wood chips and shavings all over. Don't be scared. It's not your guitar breaking. It's just typically there's always gunk in here and the shipping process rattles it out. But the interior of the case is also ebony. Let's check out our case candy. Here's our original box tag just for historical preservation. Our Gibson warranty card in our new tiny format. Please download our app, case keys and silica packet. A spare blank truss rod cover if Supreme's a bit too much for you. A basic Gibson strap. A black baggie containing these items. The owner's manual. A polishing cloth. And everyone's favorite, Gibson multi-tool. Let's go ahead and throw this one on the workbench to take an individual look at its parts and specs, do a QC analysis, and then hear how it sounds in a brief tone sample. Inside the new model, let's see what we can find. Well, I found something very fast. What's going on with the edge of our fretboard there, my friends? It appears they've left a piece of masking tape on it, so they must mask off the end of it to keep it nice and clean. But it came off nicely. But we can confirm our spec sheet. It is a Burstbucker Rhythm Pro. You can tell this is a potted pickup because you can see the waxy residue on the back. And the back of our Lead Pro actually calls it a Plus model. And since these are coil splittable, you have your 4-conductor wiring. So it's not your typical braided lead, it's the gray insulated wire. However, there's another one going to this pickup, which is actually a grounding wire. I don't think I've seen Gibson do that for these, so that might be a new protocol for them. As far as our pickup routes, we can see it is a long neck tenon constructed guitar, and they did not change up the woods at all for these. It's still a maple poplar maple sandwich before you meet a spruce bracing before your center block that's made of maple. Then you can peek in here to see the spruce bracing on the backside, and then you get all the same stuff. Historically, ES routes are never all that clean. I mean, you can see wood splintering. I thought this area was about the worst of it right here. There's so many flakes that need to come off. So everything seems normal in that respect. But the pickup readings within the circuit, 8.5 k ohms, the neck is 7.67, and the middle position for fun is 4. Now don't forget, you can also coil split them. But, it doesn't change anything. Did they really put a PCB in these? I suppose we'll have to break out the endoscope to find out for sure. Nah, looks like they're actually doing hand-wired pots. So I'm not sure why we don't get the readings to be different. We'll have to see if it actually works as described. I suppose while we're in here, you can look along your curved edges. Those seem a little bit different than usual. Don't they seem like longer towards the center? But here's a look towards the cutaway of the horn. You can see they put a little block of wood right up there to give it something to brace onto. But now we'll take a look inside of our other F-hole. But this is rather interesting. So they do call it a Supreme, but they also just call it a baseline ES335. So that tells me they're probably just taking the figured 335s and upgrading all the other stuff that we talked about. So Gibson does view this as a 335. That has just been souped up. Okay. But right here, what you're seeing is the center block, and here's the other side of the cutaway horn. And here we can see that bottom side bracing that I was talking about, as well as the top side ones on our center block of maple. And now I'd be curious on your guys' thoughts. Do you think they should have left them pick guardless because you've got all these beautiful figurings and colors going on? I think it looks pretty good as is, but at the same time, a pick pickguardless 335 does look a little bit strange. Here that is for an A-B comparison. I feel this finish could have really pulled off a tortoiseshell colored one pretty nicely. But we can take a second just to appreciate our very active top. They spec these out as AAA, but here's the thing. Some AAAs can look great, other ones can be kind of mild. I never really pay attention to the how many A's does it have, because I just look at it and I grade it myself whether I like it or not, because a wood will look way different raw than it does with a finish on it. But I like this one. It's got a good mixture of regular wood grain underneath it too. But here's an up close look at our 5-ply binding, and you can see that they actually paint the edges of the F-hole black to hide the layers. And then we should take a look at our bridge and tailpiece real quick. It's lightweight aluminum but gold plated API bridge, Nashville in style. You can use the Allen keys to adjust it if you wish. And the tailpiece is the same lightweight aluminum by API. Moving on from our poplar maple body, we've got a straight up mahogany neck with an ebony fretboard. As far as the QC in this particular area, this is usually where they get knocked down a few points. But this one, I don't think it's really that bad. I mean, you got a couple of tooling marks around your binding, but I would say the worst on this, besides leaving that masking tape, is, we have a little bit of buffing compound around our fret nibs that you could potentially clean off. And maybe some mild chatter marks here. And could the nut be shaped a little bit better? Sure, but these are kind of nitpicky things. I measure a 1.69 inch nut width, increasing to 2.09. First fret neck depth, 0.85, increasing to about 0.96 by the 12th. It's a nice C-shaped profile. I know those numbers make it sound maybe a little bit on the slimmer side, but it honestly feels pretty substantial in that kind of medium category. Here's a look at that neck profile at the first fret and the 12th fret. Just a nice rounded C. If you don't understand what I mean by a compound fretboard radius, they make it more round in your chording areas to make that easier. However, in the soloing area, they flatten it out a bit. And usually that's close to like a 10 to 14 inch radius. For a player with my skill level, doesn't affect me at all. I don't even notice it, but I've heard some guys who are really skilled love the slight difference. So that's one of those things you're either going to love it or you could care less. Here's a look at our headstock with our 7-ply binding up here, Gibson mother of pearl logo with our new chandelier. Can't wait to see the mod collection start to have fun with some of these ES Supremes and give us custom colors. But here's an area where we can see through to the bare mahogany neck. It'd be the only spot that you could do that on the other models, but our truss rod looks great on this one. And this is how they stylize Supreme on our truss rod cover, written vertically. And now we've got it all strung back up. I wanted to mention one more thing I like. The endoscope doesn't quite have the quality to see this, but it's nice to peek in here as the player and get to see the flame figuring from the back on the front. It's just like a little hidden Easter egg just for you to enjoy. But flipping over to the back side, you do not have any kind of control access routes. You gotta fish all that through the bridge pickup cavity. But I'd say the back is even better than the front. It's got the similar wood streakiness to it, but maybe just a little bit wider of flame. But these are one-piece back pressed veneers, so they can get away with it not having a center seam. Then don't forget to appreciate our sides. This one, maybe not as nice as that 335 figured blueberry burst that we just recently documented, but still plenty nice. And did you notice, while you're playing this, you do get to appreciate the natural neck. It gives your eye a little bit of a difference in color to appreciate. Kind of a minty green with a white and your light brown. But please keep in mind, the color of your neck is going to vary example to example, since it appears to just be a natural finish without any specific dyes. So you could find one with a darker look. But the 3-ply binding is a nice touch because that's what the original Les Paul Supremes actually have on the back as well. Whether that was intentional or them just following the 355 format, I will never know, but these are looking pretty nice. 3-ply gets a really bold black layer, so it pops out more than others. But here's a run upside the back of the neck before we get to our Golden Grover tuners. Again, they're locking, so if you've never had a set of those before, you can loosen it and then tighten it. They don't keep your guitar in tune better, they just make it quicker to change strings. However, if you don't know how to properly wrap your strings, that's the only argument you can make for them keeping in tune better, because essentially you're eliminating the windings around the peg by using these. The serial number on this one dates it to 2024, 145th day of the year. Initial batch of the day, number 205, made in USA. This is a Nashville product. All said and done, this one is 8 pounds, 5.4 ounces. So let's go ahead, plug it in, and hear how our Seafoam ES Supreme sounds. Okay, so first impressions, I was a little bit scared because I really like the calibrated T-type pickup, so switching to something more modern means this is meant for modern music. However, it still definitely has some classic tones to it, and this neck profile actually is quite chunky. So here's just our neck. I find that quite nice. But when you pull up on your knob to split it, I think it's actually a tap. It's not just them confusing words, because listen to this. It's not just getting rid of half the coil, it's just some of the windings. Sounds a bit more P90-like. Very percussive without being too thin. Do that same test with our bridge pickup. That's just its regular tones. That plus almost has like a telly twang to it. So that's definitely more of a modern tone. Not as big of a fan of the tap on that one. But how do they blend together normally? It's different, but I like it. And you can mess around with just your neck split. Or just the bridge split. Or both of them split. Or just don't worry about any of that stuff and just play it like normal. For me personally, I don't really like the taps that much on the dirty channel. It kind of adds a wah to it. It's almost like an out of phase quack to it. You can hear it on the clean channel too. But I think it sounds a bit better there. So I'd personally suggest just sticking with your humbuckers when you want to get dirty. Bridge is still very driving. That sounds pretty good for lead. And middle. So there we go, the new ES Supreme. I was shocked that they made these things, but honestly, I'm glad they're here. It's about what I was expecting as far as the pickup sounding a little bit more modern, but I love some of these new colors that they're bringing out on the semi-hollow range. The semi-hollows don't sell quite as well for Gibson as compared to a Les Paul, but I'm glad that they're giving us some new options. So if you were kind of on the fence, honestly, I would suggest trying it out. If you can find one at a store to give it a go, I think you will end up liking it if you like the slightly bigger neck profiles and you were already in the market for like a really nice fancy figured ES335. Because that's basically what this is, just a little bit more modernized. And yeah, the coil tapping's fun, but you don't have to use it if you don't want to. As far as negatives, it's really just that more modernized tone. Whether that's what you're after or not, that's just kind of a personal preference thing. The QC on this one was actually surprisingly good. If we really want to get in their face, right here on the binding, they did take it down just a little bit too much right there by that 12th fret. But this is just a beautiful example. I'm happy with the color I chose. But alright, Troglodytes, if you're interested in being the owner of my demo piece here, you can find it for sale on my website, troglysguitarshow.com. Otherwise, we'll catch you guys tomorrow on the next one. Take care.